The idea that Jesus didn't exist just bumps up against all the gospel accounts we have, the other New Testament writings, the other Christian writers outside of the Bible like Ignatius and Polycarp, Clement of Rome, etc., that are early, and the non-Christian writings.
For nearly 2,000 years, skeptics have challenged Christianity with one bold claim: show us the proof. Where are the artifacts? Where are the eyewitnesses carved in stone? Critics argued that archaeological silence proved their point. No physical evidence meant no historical credibility. But beneath the soil of modern Frankfurt, something waited in absolute darkness. A tiny silver capsule, no bigger than your thumb, lay undisturbed for 18 centuries. Inside it, a message so clear and so shocking that when scientists finally read it in 2024, it sent shockwaves through universities worldwide. Stick around, because what this ancient voice proclaimed will challenge everything you thought you knew about early Christianity. The year was 2018. Construction crews were breaking ground in Frankfurt-Praunheim when they stumbled upon something unexpected. Archaeologists rushed to the site and uncovered an ancient Roman cemetery containing 127 graves. This wasn't just any burial ground. It belonged to Nida, a thriving Roman city that stood where Frankfurt exists today. Between the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Nida served as a crucial military and trade hub along the empire's northern frontier. Among those 127 graves, number 134 held something unusual. The skeleton belonged to a man between 35 and 45 years old. Clay pottery and a simple incense burner accompanied him into death. But tucked beneath his chin, archaeologists found a silver capsule measuring just 3.5 centimeters long. The tiny container had 2 small eyelets, clearly designed for threading a leather cord through it. This man had worn this capsule around his neck every single day. When researchers carefully extracted the capsule, they realized something was rolled up inside. The object was impossibly fragile. It was a thin strip of silver foil that had been tightly wound and sealed for nearly 2 millennia. Early X-rays in 2019 revealed faint markings. There was definitely writing on it, but the text remained completely unreadable. The silver was creased, compressed, and so delicate that any attempt to physically unroll it would destroy the inscription forever. For 6 long years, the capsule sat in museum storage. Researchers waited for technology to catch up with their curiosity. What could possibly be important enough that a man would take it to his grave? And most intriguingly, what words had someone carefully inscribed on that fragile silver nearly 1,800 years ago? May 2024 marked the turning point. The Frankfurt amulet arrived at the Leibniz Center for Archaeology in Mainz. Dr. Ivan Kalandra and his research team prepared for one of the most delicate operations in archaeological history. They faced a seemingly impossible challenge: read the inscription without physically touching the silver foil inside. One wrong move would crumble 18 centuries of preserved history into dust. The solution lay in high-resolution CT scanning. This was the same technology that had successfully decoded the Herculaneum scrolls carbonized by Mount Vesuvius. The CT scanner would capture every microscopic variation in the metal's surface, while the team virtually reconstructed how the foil had been rolled. The scanning process took weeks. Technicians adjusted settings, calibrated equipment, and captured thousands of images. Slowly, layer by layer, a 3-dimensional model began forming on computer screens. Professor Marcus Schultz took on the task of deciphering what appeared. He's a specialist in Latin inscriptions at Goethe University Frankfurt. Schultz spent months staring at his computer screen, studying faded letters that had been compressed and warped by time. The inscription used abbreviations common in early Christian texts, but the damage made individual words nearly impossible to distinguish. He consulted theologians and brought in additional language experts. Sometimes weeks passed before he gained confidence in translating a single line. Then the full text finally emerged. 18 lines of Latin, written in a steady hand, declared a message so theologically sophisticated that it stunned everyone involved. This wasn't a simple prayer or generic blessing. The inscription contained direct biblical quotations and proclaimed theological positions that historians believed hadn't reached Northern Europe until much later. Professor Schultz said this finding would affect many areas of research and keep scholars occupied for years. The technology had done its job. The message was clear. But what that ancient voice actually said would prove even more shocking. The inscription begins with an invocation. In the name of Saint Titus, holy, holy, holy. Titus was a direct companion of the Apostle Paul, mentioned multiple times in the New Testament. The triple holy echoes a liturgical formula that historians previously believed entered Christian worship only in the 4th century. Yet here it appears, carved in silver, decades earlier than documented. The text continues with absolute clarity. In the name of Jesus Christ, Son of God, the Lord of the world. There's no ambiguity here. The inscription directly calls Jesus the Son of God and declares him Lord of the world. In Roman culture, Lord of the world was a title reserved for the emperor himself. Proclaiming Jesus as Lord of the world wasn't just religious expression, it was political defiance. Then comes the most remarkable section. The silver foil contains a direct quotation from Paul's letter to the Philippians. Before Jesus Christ, all knees bow, the heavenly, the earthly, the subterranean, and every tongue confesses to Jesus Christ. Finding this quoted on a personal amulet from the mid-3rd century proves that ordinary believers in remote Roman territories had access to Paul's letters and understood their theological weight. The entire text is purely Christian, with no mixture of pagan elements or Jewish mysticism. Most amulets from this period blended different traditions. They combined Christian phrases with magical symbols or pagan god names. The Frankfurt inscription stands completely apart. It represents Orthodox Christian theology, expressed with precision and confidence. Dr. Wolfram Kinzig from the University of Bonn declared this the earliest direct material evidence of Christianity in Germania Superior. Previously, the oldest reliable Christian artifacts from north of the Alps dated to around 350 AD. The Frankfurt amulet pushes that timeline back to somewhere between 230 and 270 AD. That's not a minor adjustment. It represents a fundamental shift in understanding how quickly Christianity spread during its most dangerous centuries. But knowing what the inscription says raises an even more compelling question. Who was the man who wore it? The dating of grave 134 places this man's death somewhere between 230 and 270 AD. That timeline puts him directly in the path of one of Christianity's bloodiest periods. In 249 AD, Emperor Decius launched the first systematic, empire-wide persecution of Christians. On December 249, Roman authorities received orders to arrest Christian leaders. On January 20, 250, soldiers executed Pope Fabian in Rome. Then came the Universal Edict. Every citizen throughout the Roman Empire had to appear before local officials and perform a sacrifice to the Roman gods and the emperor's spirit. After sacrificing, they received a certificate proving their compliance. Jews received exemption because Judaism was an ancient, recognized religion. But Christians couldn't sacrifice to other gods without betraying everything they believed. The choice was brutally simple: renounce Christ or face consequences. Those consequences were severe. Christians who refused to sacrifice faced immediate arrest. Authorities tortured them to force compliance, confiscated their property, and executed those who wouldn't break. Historical estimates suggest between 3,000 and 3,500 Christians were killed during the 18 months of Decian persecution. The man in grave 134 lived through this nightmare. He resided in Nida, a frontier town far from major Christian centers like Rome or Carthage. Yet he wore his silver amulet daily. He threaded the leather cord through those small eyelets and let the capsule rest against his throat. Every morning when he put it on, he reaffirmed his commitment to Jesus Christ as Lord. This was conviction that could get him killed. His grave goods paint a picture of ordinary life. The clay pottery and incense burner suggest modest means, but nothing about his faith was ordinary. At a time when simply possessing Christian texts could mean execution, he carried an explicit declaration of Jesus' divinity against his skin. When he died, his community buried him with that amulet still positioned at his neck. In death, as in life, he proclaimed Jesus Christ as Lord. This single man's courage, preserved in silver and bone, now stands as undeniable proof of what early Christians truly believed. The Frankfurt silver inscription demolishes multiple assumptions about early Christianity. First, it proves that Christian communities in Germania Superior existed much earlier than historians believed possible. Before this discovery, scholars thought Christianity only reached these northern regions in the 4th century. Now we know organized believers with sophisticated theology lived there a century earlier, during the worst persecution the Church had faced. Second, it reveals how rapidly Christian teaching spread across the empire. Nida sat on the frontier, hundreds of miles from Jerusalem or Rome. Yet believers there possessed Paul's letters and understood complex theology. They maintained orthodox faith without mixing in pagan elements. The speed and reach of Christianity's expansion far exceeded what archaeological evidence previously indicated. Third, the inscription directly contradicts skeptics who claim Jesus' divinity was a later invention. Critics have argued that early Christians saw Jesus as merely a wise teacher. They say the Church only gradually elevated him to divine status through political councils. The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD supposedly formalized this invented divinity. But the Frankfurt amulet comes from at least 50 years before Nicaea, and it declares without hesitation, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Lord of the world, before whom every knee bows. This wasn't an official church document. This was a personal amulet worn by an ordinary believer in a frontier town. If regular Christians in remote areas already proclaimed Jesus' divinity in the mid-3rd century, that belief must have been fundamental to Christianity from its earliest days. The inscription matches exactly what the apostles taught and what the New Testament records. The Frankfurt silver amulet currently sits on display at the Archaeological Museum Frankfurt. Researchers continue studying every aspect. The man who wore this amulet has finally spoken across 18 centuries. They said there was no evidence. They said the claims were exaggerated. Then a grave opened, technology advanced, and an ancient voice declared, Jesus Christ is Lord. So, what do you think about this incredible discovery? Does physical evidence like this strengthen historical credibility, or do you believe faith needs no archaeological proof? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you found it fascinating. subscribe to our channel for more such stories. Until next time, keep questioning and keep exploring.